I'm reviewing every new episode of Futurama on my channel, and here's my thoughts on Beauty and the Bug.
We are the Buggalo.
What is up guys, Mike here, welcome back to my channel. Make sure you subscribe for more pop culture content every week and other Futurama videos as well. Let's get into it. Alright, so another really strong episode of Futurama for this season. If you're new to my channel, I have been doing reviews of every new episode of Futurama, and so far I've been really impressed by the new season. The first episode on NFTs was a stinker, but I've really appreciated the more grounded episodes that we've had in the last 2 weeks, and this next one really feels like a classic Futurama story, which is exactly what I want from this season.
I pay close attention when things are about to get jiggy.
And I like that with episodes like this week's episode and last week's episode, there are kind of references and callbacks to earlier episodes of Futurama. Last week, of course, called back to the Amazonian women episode.
I had snoo.
And this week's episode also calls back to the episode called Where the Buggalo Roam, which is about the buggalo creatures on Mars that Amy's parents look after.
Man, it must take forever to brand all those cattle.
Not really. We own so much stuff, it's easier just to brand everything that not ours.
I think it's really great that Futurama is now in this stage where it has a really strong supporting cast and legacy and storylines that it can call back to for old school fans. I think a lot of people talk about how modern Simpsons, as in like the last 5 years in like the season 30s, have been really like self-referential to the early days of The Simpsons.
And here's something to help you never forget. I already have one of those.
Particularly because the writers and like producers of the show are probably people who grew up on The Simpsons, so they have a really strong knowledge of what makes the show work. And that's why I think a lot of people have said that the last few seasons of The Simpsons have actually been really good compared to like the age of like the season 20 era. And I think now Futurama is kind of in this sort of renaissance period of like self-referencing and calling back to things that have happened before. It's another Bender-centric episode, as Bender essentially becomes a matador in like a very Spanish Western kind of inspired episode.
Hey, Marquita, let me ask you something. Matador to Matador.
I've got to say Bender is definitely the breakout character of Futurama. I mean, Fry barely had any lines in this episode, and I've always seen him as the main character. And it's really interesting to see over the series' growth that Bender has kind of become the front and foremost character.
B-E-N-D-E-R, Bender!
And I don't really have a problem with that because I think Bender is definitely the most creative and entertaining character in the show. And John DiMaggio's voice acting is, of course, legendary.
Audience, say it with me. Legendary.
I think referencing like the Spanish tradition of the running with the bulls, which is like quite frankly a barbaric tradition that I don't understand why it happens because people always get hurt in this tradition.
Sign those liability waivers, say goodbye to your loved ones,
And run for your lives!
With the running of the Buggalo is like a really great concept and scene setter. We're back on planet Mars, which is where Amy is from and her family lives. And it really sets the scene for what we're about to get. I do really like any episode that does explore Bender's like Spanish heritage. You know, I think that all started with a one-off joke where Bender says that his full name is Bender Bending Rodriguez.
Now, some of the tunnels have metal bars, so I'll need someone who's good at bending. Leela, how about you?
Sure, I'll do it.
Like hell you will. Bending's my middle name.
It is?
Yep. My full name is Bender Bending Rodriguez.
And now it's kind of spanned into like a long-lasting lore and backstory of his character. And I guess that was explored a bit in episode 1 of this season as well. And Bender meets a fembot with a hilariously long Spanish name.
What's your name?
Marquita, Maria, Cristina, Chiquita, Alana, Paloma, Ramona, Rosita.
I'm not Spanish, but my heritage is actually Italian, so I relate really hard to this joke. I think it's really, really great.
Beauty, do you have many more names?
Yes, many. Veronica, Helena, Hermina, Francesca, Esperanza, Valentina.
And throughout this episode, there is like a commentator who is calling all of the action throughout the episode, which was a really great framing device. I also love how he describes the running of the Buggalo as a sick and unnecessary exercise.
What a sick and unnecessary exercise.
And such a beautiful tradition.
Sometimes I feel like the really in-your-face blatant messaging that Futurama can do is really, really funny. Like, I think there is an inherent funniness of clearly the Bugalo is a reference to the running of the bulls, and clearly when they say it's a sick and unnecessary exercise, they're just blatantly saying how stupid the running of the bulls is. I've always also loved Bender's characterization as like this womanizer and this guy that like all the ladies want to be around. It also gives us a reappearance of the Crushinator and her sisters, who I think first appeared in episode 2 of the show. Where the crew gets stuck on the moon and has to do work for this farmer, and he says, "Don't touch any of my daughters."
You who?
I mean, come on, the Crushinator is just one of the best Futurama gags of all time. I love that so much. There's also some more meta comedy in this episode where they throw to like a word from the sponsors, interrupting the performance, and Bender does an ad for Hulu Premium where you can get the same old shows for a higher price.
So upgrade now to ad-free Hulu Premium.
Obviously calling out to Hulu and the streaming wars and just like the amount of money that streamers try to take from their customers. I always really loved when shows like The Simpsons took the mickey out of Fox, because there are so many instances of that happening, and I think it's a really good way for the writers to kind of have a little bit of fun. And I think it kind of puts Fox in a good light as well when jokes like that are able to happen, because it shows that they have a sense of humor. And in that sense, I think it's good that Hulu is allowing a sense of humor, because I think a really strict company wouldn't allow a joke like that to go in the episode. There's also like a subplot in this episode around like the sentience of the Bugalo, and you know, I guess it's almost like hearkening to like vegan values, and you know, Amy doesn't want to eat the Bugalo, she eats vegan Bugalo, which I think is interesting, and Bender then has this connection with the Bugalo who can talk to him, and no one really believes him.
We are honored to share our sleeping space with you.
Oh, you can talk?
I thought this was like an interesting side plot line to have like an animal rights kind of message in there, and I thought it was fine. It didn't really do much for me, but I thought it was a good way to chug the plot along, because it gets to this point at the end where Professor Farnsworth realizes that the Bugalo can communicate as a hive mind. Their own sentience isn't enough as an individual, but when they group together, they can communicate as a hive mind. And I love the sci-fi concept of a hive mind. It really called back to me the book Ender's Game, which is a classic science fiction novel. I don't know if it was directly a reference to this, but at the end of that book, spoilers for Ender's Game, by the way, which is like a very, very old science fiction book, the aliens that they are fighting are revealed to have a hive mind. And I'm sure that wasn't the first like instance of the concept of a hive mind being used in science fiction, but I do think that book definitely would have popularized the concept. Also, that subtext of like the Bugalo having feelings and thoughts and being able to communicate and being sentient and not wanting to fight is really interesting, because it's revealed at the end that in fact they do love to fight. This definitely wasn't intentional, but to me it kind of reminded me of like this defense in like the Pokemon games, because I feel like a common criticism of Pokemon is that it's like animal abuse to force these monsters to fight each other almost to the death, but then the answer always seems to be like, no, they love fighting. They are born to fight. They want to battle. Another highlight of the episode, just to jump back to the start, is during the running of the Bugalo where Hermes basically limbos his way underneath them to avoid being like trampled by them. I've always loved Hermes and Limbo. I just think that's such a fun and funny gag that I'm happy for them to repeat over and over and over again. Overall, I thought this was a great episode. I'm really stoked that Futurama has now sort of built this legacy and built this world, and it's almost like The Simpsons in the sense that, you know, after a bunch of years, The Simpsons really wasn't just about The Simpsons anymore. It was about the supporting cast as well. There were so many great one-off characters, and we really see that in this episode. You know, there's destinations, there's set areas and places they can go where different characters exist. I think Springfield in The Simpsons really started to feel like it was really lived in and it really existed. You know, it was a really full world where people lived their day-to-day lives in that show, and I think Futurama is now at a similar point where it feels like it's a full universe and all of these places exist and it lives and breathes. And I'm really excited for next week's episode, because this one was another strong one. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. Check out the other Futurama videos on my channel as well, and I do pop culture content here pretty much 3 days a week, videos like this, so make sure you hit the subscribe button. I also have a Patreon. That is the best way to support me and get around me. If you want to chuck a couple dollars my way, it would mean the world. Plus, I do a blog and a podcast, and all of that information is down below in the description to this podcast. So if you like my content and you want to check out more of my stuff, it is all down there. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back with another video tomorrow, and I will see you soon. My name's Radio Mike, and this has been The Inside of My Mind. Catch you later.